I wanted to bring you all together to have a session talking about compassion fatigue. I sort of feel like we could call the session like running a refugee practice in the apocalypse, which is kind of what it feels like right now for me. And I thought probably it would feel, you'd have similar feelings around the table. But I just kind of wanted everybody to kind of share their thoughts. For me, it feels like kind of a lonely time practicing. I think that it was always kind of hard to practice in this area. And I know all of us have really focused our practices in working in some of the what most people consider the challenging type of cases. We're all attracted to the type of cases where stakes are very high, and there tends to be a lot of trauma, a lot of just very high stakes. But I think that for me anyways, during the pandemic, what was stripped away was a lot of the group dynamic and just having people to bounce ideas off of, and just having that support network present and around us all of the time. And so we've kind of burrowed away into our private little caves, and it's started to come back for me, at least a little bit. Like every once in a while now, I'll go out to an event and I'll talk to other people. But I think as I do that, I realize how much I've missed it. And anyways, I just wanted to do a session to share like how we are managing. And I think because also we're all fairly senior into our practice and are doing this not just as newcomers, I'm reflecting back a fair bit on the train wreck that was how I was doing this at the beginning of my career, and how close to like absolute burnout I was all the time as a junior practitioner, what I thought was normal, and just some of the problems, and just thinking that as a conversation among the five of us about about what we experienced at that time and what kind of strategies we use now, I think that there might be some insight for people who are doing this without the many years of experience running this type of a practice. So anyways, I just wanted to open it as a very like informal discussion type of thing. How's everybody feeling? What is everybody thinking is the stuff that works best for them? What are some of the war stories about how things have been, like what are the biggest challenges people have experienced in the past and how they've managed those?
If I can jump in, I'm reflecting back, it's been over 30 years. And when I started out, I don't think there was this terminology or awareness of trauma or vicarious trauma, or, just being very sensitive to the client's needs. I think naturally we were when you're drawn to this type of clientele. But I think when I reflect on when I was younger, I think I was more stoic, and maybe it's because you come out of law school, like when you're a lawyer and you just, you're hearing your client tell a story and you write it down and you go represent them. But I think over the years, and especially now where this language of trauma-informed practice is just more common, people are becoming educated, because law schools certainly didn't teach it, right? They certainly didn't teach it. And it's been in the last few years, I can say for myself, where I've recognized, I'm exhausted. I don't want to take another file. And that happened to me. Maybe it was the middle of the pandemic where I had to say to my assistant, we need to put a pause on taking some of these files, because I don't think I have capacity and I don't think I'm going to do a good job. So then I would refer, and I'd probably put your names out there for other people that I know that can do this work competently. But I think my insight and awareness as to the impact of this type of work didn't come until much later in my career. I probably did feel exhausted even then, but in a different way, because I was being a lawyer, and I thought I was doing my job. And I think my insight came much later as to the heaviness of this work and the toll it takes on us as lawyers. So that's just sort of my reflection.
I think sometimes too, when I sometimes am working with clients too, where they're facing difficult circumstances, sometimes I find myself thinking, how can I say this is too much when their problems would seem so much worse than the like me being burnt out, you know? And so, this was something that was very hard for me to establish in terms of boundaries. Like for me to say, I'm too tired, I'm having a hard time. I was always comparing the degree of my burnout with the degree of their problems. And I think that always, especially when I was young, when I was like, how can I say no when they don't have those choices? And so I think that was a really hard muscle for me to develop earlier on. I see a lot of heads nodding that is a familiar instinct, but I really thought that like drawing boundaries was like a theoretical thing that people said from the outside. I didn't actually understand that if I kept crossing them, that I was actually of no value to anybody. And so that was something that I learned very like in a painstaking kind of a way over years.
And I think that comparison thing is incredibly dangerous. And I had that very much in the beginning. I don't think I had a lot of compassion for my own needs when I was comparing them against the needs of our clients. And I think there was always this concern that if you don't take it, there's only a handful of people you can refer them to, and everyone's really busy, and it's this idea that, well, if I don't take it, then what's going to happen to this person? And so it's so easily to set up boundaries, but then to constantly cross them. And so I think even just within the past few years, though, I think there's been a much bigger dialogue around boundaries and what that means and how important it is. And I think especially after doing it for so many years, you reach a point where you see a lot of good lawyers leaving the profession, and you realize that that's where you are, that you are either going to put boundaries in order to keep doing it, or you're not going to be able to keep doing it. And so it kind of comes to a head at a certain point. And I think being a younger lawyer, you're so driven by this the sense of everything that needs doing, and it's easy to just completely put yourself on the back burner. So anytime I'm talking to a new lawyer, that's something I'm constantly saying is I'll see these incredible things they've done for their client. I'm like, just make sure to take a break, put up boundaries, because like we want to keep you here in this profession, and at this pace, you're not you're not going to be able to keep at it.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes like your success can be your downfall. Actually, somebody once said that to me. This was BJ Caruso a long time ago, said that your strength is your weakness, Deanna. Your strength is your weakness. And I was like, oh, right. Because like you keep thinking, well, I can just squeeze a little bit harder. More juice will come out. It always does. But at some point, like if you keep treating yourself in that way, like you will get to the point where nothing more comes out. It's not a place you want to be.
Yeah. And I think this was something that, like, for me at least, the pandemic really brought to a head, that when we were, at home, we had the kids at home. I have two little kids. They're still little, but they were even smaller then. And it was so obvious to me that there was no way I could keep doing it the way I had been doing it. It was not going to work. I couldn't have kids at home and manage like making them feel safe in an inherently unsafe world, and caring for myself, and also burning it at both ends at work. So it's funny that you say like, how are you doing? And I feel like mental health wise, I'm probably the best I ever have been in this work, because I am so aggressively, fiercely self-protective in a way that I absolutely wasn't at the beginning. And I feel like I now understand in my bones that I cannot fix everything. And it is not my fault when applications get denied. And there's only so much I can do in an inherently unfair system. And so I feel like I've had to forgive myself and like just dig so deep for that self-compassion to say no, and to like be okay with the no's, and to be okay letting things go that I can't do. And yeah, so I feel like it was interesting that the pandemic in that way really highlighted that it was super unsustainable.
mean, for my part, for better or worse, I hit some of my most emotionally taxing cases probably in the first 2 years of my career. Very, very serious mental health conditions intermingling in. And I had to very quickly figure out how to control my communications. Because the more you communicate, the more they communicate. And you end up in this cycle that it's just there's no end. And that's probably not healthy for any of us. So very quickly on, for myself and for my clients, I started looking at support people. Who in my client's life was their support person? Who in my life could I unload to in a safe environment, in a trusted environment? Because sometimes you just need to say it out loud to put it behind you. But as we hit the pandemic, I knew absolutely without a doubt, I could not be locked down at home. There is zero possibility in my mind that I could have been doing this work sitting in my home. Because I've always made a really strong separation. I'm not trying to take work home because I want that separation. I want to be able to say, this is my brain at work. These are my clients at work. These are the stresses I have at work. And it's almost an unloading as I commute myself home for the day.
Me too, Erin. I feel that one so much. Like, I was actually watching one of those little CBC pieces, and Adrienne Arsenault was talking about the fact that when she went out in the field, she would actually bring a set of clothing that she would actually carry in a plastic bag, that it was like sealed off from the experiences she was having in that place. And that when she got ready to go home, she would like change into that set of clothing and like leave her experiences behind. And I could really relate to that. Like, for me, the commute into work is when I like leave my home life, go into my work world, and then I can come home at the end of the day and again make that separation. And so yeah, that commute, it's like, it's a journey, you know. It's like, and so yeah, I really, that really spoke to me.
I agree with you guys. It's funny, I think I lasted a week at home during the pandemic and just then started coming into the office. No one was here. But it was, like you said, Erin, that sort of like, this is work. And then I go home, I've got 4 kids and a dog, and, you know, life is happening at home. So I need to be turned on in a different way there. I need to leave this stuff behind.
So it's funny, I'm the exact opposite. I love working from home. I will never work from an office again. I do not like commuting. I like being surrounded. I like having my tea close by. I like having, if I am going to go out, then it's like to do exercise or to do something productive. And so, yeah, I like, obviously with the kids at home, that was not really sustainable, but now they're old enough that they go to junior kindergarten and elementary schools. So I love, my house is quiet. I finally have it to myself and all my things are close by. So
I get it.
Yeah, I know. And it's funny, I don't know, as I get older too, I've just sort of leaned into being like, I am just going to do what works for me. And it doesn't matter if I am the only person it works for. It's like, it works for me, and that's okay.
For sure.
And but I agree, Erin, having like sounding boards, I don't know how people would do it in solo practice or any sort of practice if they didn't have people to fetch to about their days or their clients, or the number of people I, can call and give them $1 to, reflect on a file with me. Yeah, even though now I'm in solo practice, I feel like I'm always on the phone with people about it because it's way too much to carry alone.
Well, and I think talking about different people's different preferences, it really brings to mind for me just how important it is to just be able to really be connected with yourself and your own instincts and what you need. Because I think there have been times in this profession where I've been so burnt out or so just in a case that I become very disconnected from myself, and I'll forget to eat. I'll be working on something in this cave for 2 days, and I'll come out of it completely exhausted and burnt out. And I've really started making like a very concerted effort to not be doing that. I need to be able to do this work and kind of be embodied and listening to what I need. And for me, it is actually a mix of working from home and coming to the office and it's different based on different days, but I think
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that that's really key though, being able to tune in and being like, okay, where am I at right now? What's working? What isn't working? Can I reevaluate? Where am I at? How do I, because I too have that issue where like I burn down the like body brain communication road, and it serves me well in the sense that like I forget about my appetite, I forget about my my need for sleep, I forget about all sorts of other stuff during the duration of that time, but it's not something that that works on a long-term basis for sure. I have a very specific question for all of you, which is I mean, I don't think I'm alone in this, but sometimes when you're like facing like difficult decision followed by difficult decision followed by frustrating policy, like how do you deal with the anger?
Call a friend, vent.
Yeah.
I think you and I have done that a number of times.
Yeah, 100% we have, Kamaljit.
And strategize and figure out there's another way to work around it. I mean, you know, I've in my practice, I've taken certain initiatives and it's taken me a long time to get them done, but I just keep, it's like, I don't know, just keep going at it, even though it may be frustrating, but it's important to me. But I think when there's that anger and that frustration with just the system not working the way it should be, it's, to me, it's reach out to a lifeline and talk it out, and then move forward. That lifeline to me has been invaluable.
Yeah, when I went into this work, even when I was a junior lawyer, like I was really prepared for, you know, the vicarious trauma and hearing client stories. Like I'd been a member of Amnesty International since I was like 10. I knew what happened in the world. I was like ready for the literal war stories. And I wasn't ready for how utterly soul destroying it was to see the Canadian government response to suffering and trauma. Like every time that's what crushed me. Right? Like a negative decision, a cruel board member, a irrational federal court decision. Like anyway, so I was really prepared and I felt like I had my toolkit ready for listening to client stories, and I wasn't prepared for how disturbing it would be to work with a system that's so lacking
Alice.
in compassion.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at, Laura. And that's the one that I find is right now my biggest barrier, that I don't know what to do with that feeling of sadness and like I don't know, it's hard not to get down about that. It's not, I mean, people always say to me, like, isn't it so hard to listen to those stories every day? And actually, that's not the part that I find difficult at all. I feel like the humanity that you hear from other people and the experiences that they've suffered, that's not the difficult part. It's trying to explain to them how the system is going to deal with them that I find super challenging. And again, I'm seeing a lot of nods that other people feel that that is a lot of what the challenges. And yeah,
that I totally resonates. Is like, so when you talk about dealing with anger, for me, like if it's a big picture issue, that tends to be fine. I can just do exactly what I just described. I can dig my heels in. I trust, you know, the layers of appeals that eventually, if there's like a case that I really think I needs to win and deserves to win, I can tell a client that, you know, we can probably get there. I can't guarantee it, but we probably can. But it's the littler things, the decisions that you see from the Canadian government, whether it's DOJ, CBSA, the courts, where and it's often some of the smaller things where you're trying to just describe like this is how this needs to work and these are all the reasons, and the adversarial system just provides no room for them to accept that, you know, this is actually a really exceptional case and you should really look at this one as compared to maybe the 20 others that we have an application pending for. Like whether it's even just like a work permit for a refugee, when we get a refused work permit and there is no one I can go to and this person needs to work and they're just sitting there, and yet there is just walls, and like it's those little things where there's no humanity and no place to go find someone to listen to that are so frustrating.
I think for me, it was the first time I found myself counseling somebody not to come to Canada.
Mm.
You know, we get into admissibility work overseas and the futility of dealing with any visa officer to get a decision. You know, we're going to go to the federal court. I think we'll be successful. We're going to go back to the visa office. I don't think we're going to be successful. And the first time you found yourself telling somebody, let's go to federal court, and rather than seek reconsideration, let's seek a termination of your application. Quash the decision and wash your hands. And that's a very weird place to be in, to say that no matter how we position this person, no matter what discretion we think should be utilized, it's not going to happen.
And it's despite the facts, like the law says this stuff should be considered, but the way the government will respond to cases is they pinball it. So they say, oh yeah, you can go here for relief, you can go here for relief, and they're always pushing it down the line so that when you look at it big picture, the law says this is supposed to be considered. There's supposed to be a mechanism, and yet in practice they preclude that, and it's without thinking it through down the line because they're just in the adversarial system defending their position and trying to win that case. And it happened, like a good example is the Safe Third Country Agreement case where they won that. They said there's safety valves available. And then we saw people being deported and CBSA saying they didn't have the discretion to decide a TRP. So it's little examples like that. And I guess your question was how do we deal with this sort of anger? And I guess it's sharing it right now, being in community, I think is a huge part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, Deanna, we talked like, for me, I found the announcement on the special program for Ukraine. That was crushing. Like, it was so wonderful for Ukrainians and so phenomenally tragic that the Canadian government has the tools in its toolkit and is only willing to use them for certain nationalities. Like that,
I agree.
That just cracked my heart in two after having, like, I personally sponsored 2 separate Syrian families with my friends, like all the Afghans that we were hearing from, all the flooding of our inbox from Afghani women. Like, it was just so upsetting when they announced that. And I don't really know what to do with it other than to like explicitly call it out as like an inherently racist, unfair system that has been built to prioritize certain immigrants and systemically.
But it's hard again,
like, I feel because like I'm getting more radical as I get older. I don't know how anyone gets conservative as they get older. I feel like I'm the exact opposite.
But this is what I mean. Like, I don't feel like an angry person. I feel like I'm driven by compassion as opposed to anger. But at the same time, I find myself all the time like, like apoplectic with these sorts of things. And I don't wish for my response to be something that opposes this act of compassion toward people from Ukraine. It's the contrast between that and the people that are coming from Afghanistan, from Syria, from Eritrea, Ethiopia, I mean, you name it, you know? And so, you know, and just dealing with the decisions that we get, you know, the kinds of refusals that we do receive on a day-to-day basis. But I also think that, you know, and we have all spoken separately, you know, on an ongoing basis about how you just kind of pick your lane. And I know Erica and I have talked about like how for her, it's like picking a bigger decision. Like, I mean, the type of work that, like on the Mason decision, just talking about how the department has like keeps enlarging and looking for bigger admissibilities to impose. And like, for me, it's just like, you know, working at the very, very grassroots level. Like, to me, the idea of taking Supreme Court of Canada litigation is just like completely outside of the scope of what I have capacity for. But, you know, just like working at the very basic level of getting the basis of claim form filled in, that feels okay for me right now. But just like figuring out what is the one thing that you can do that makes you feel okay, like that's sort of my remedy. So I don't know, that sort of seems to be like everyone, it's like back to what we were saying before, everyone finds their own thing that feels like their self for how you deal with the accumulation of frustrations, and you just carry on, keep doing it day to day, and that's your remedy.
I find myself going into really deep, complex cases, and it'll consume me for a year or so. And then I have to step back. I have to make a really deliberate decision, possibly for the next year. I can't do it again right now. I don't have the capacity. And I mean, I think I'm going through a phase, and Eric and I have talked about this, that I feel I'm actually best positioned in refugee hearing work right now. The idea of just sitting there and chatting with these people about their lives and presenting their cases and going to their hearings, mentally, I have the capacity for that. I do not have the capacity for complex litigation today. Come back to me next year. But I find myself always in these waves of being like, I've hit a wall. We're going to go down. And honestly, working with refugees brings me mental joy. Like, to go through the process, to go to the hearings, generally very good outcomes. And it's sort of invigorating me to the practice again. And so I'll go through this for a little while, and then I'll take on a challenge.
So
That's
maybe then this is
Erin,
the question. Does everybody keep reinventing themselves? I know you have, Laura, you know, like.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say that it's interesting that Erin said that, like, how it changes, because I think that really resonates with me. Like, I moved to Toronto and I did a year at Legal Aid Ontario in just detention work, and it was super all consuming, really intense. And then I have done almost no detention reviews since I stopped that 1-year contract. And I'm now doing 3 days a week at the legal clinic in Vancouver on gender violence matters. I'm loving the gender violence files. I find them really, exciting and satisfying to help women find a path back to immigration status when they hadn't before. And I assume there's going to be some sort of timeline on that as well, that I'm not going to be doing that for 30 years. So
you're like
it is
agencying them
interesting
back
how
into
different
status?
things feel. Yes, there's a lot of family violence, temporary residence permits,
Right, okay,
or agencies, or
right.
but it is like, I don't think that if, my practice 5 years ago, I probably would have said, like, I want to do the big cases.
Right.
And now I'm like very content helping people with their very specific, right in front of them, immediate problem, and being a part of remedying that. So it does, I think it's okay to shift and change. And as things in home life and in the world around us shift and change, what we need out of work is going to shift and change.
And I find, like, even with whatever issue you're doing, sometimes what's been important for me is not trying to do it all. So when I'm doing a complex litigation piece, what I've been doing more and more is saying, I'm going to do this piece for you, but I can't be everything for you. And the cases where I have tried to do the agency, the ministerial relief, the PRA, the federal court, the litigation, those are the ones that burn me the most. And so now if I'm doing a complex litigation case, there are other people at the firm who are taking different pieces, or even at a different firm, and so that there are built-in boundaries.
I see. So you want to pick a discrete topic and make that the focus for this particular thing, and then just to kind of compartmentalize the part that you're working on. Yeah. What about for you, Kamaljit? Do you have, like, do you move around a lot in terms of what your focus is?
I think for me, because I did a lot of work with an anti-violence organization in BC and was involved in a 3-year project, and I didn't want to see that project become a dust collector. It became my mission to see some of the recommendations happen, and that was that expedited stuff for TRPs and agencies. So that took 10 years. Kept going at it, and it's an area I'm passionate about, and I continue to seek reforms and modifications. So that's something that I kind of feel like that's my little piece where I need to make a difference as much as I can. And then it's also at this point, because I think I'm the most senior one here, is taking things that will bring a systemic change as well in litigation. So I am involved outside of immigration with an action that's challenging legal aid for women fleeing violence with the intersectionality issue. And I find it fascinating. I never did an intervener application before. It was the most nerve-wracking thing I'd ever done, but it was so satisfying, and that goes to trial next year. But it's again, it aligns with the type of work I've been doing. But I also enjoy duty counsel, and got back into that when the 2 Tamil ships came into BC. And that was a crazy time, just like bizarre. And then did that for a number of years. And I think for the last few years, I've slowed down the duty council stuff because I'd done enough. I felt like I trained my juniors, said, here you go for it. So now I'm kind of coming back. And so I've kind of done what Laura did. You know, you're like, okay, I've done it. Now I'll move back a bit and I'll go back into it. So I am shifting other areas, and I am being very strategic about the kind of cases I'm taking on, being more mindful about what I'm hoping to achieve.
What about you, Erin? I think you sort of talked to this one already. You sort of said that, yeah, I think you're the one that started this whole line of conversation, actually, now that I think about it.
It is. And I mean, coming back to taking on some of the systemic issues. Kamaljit, the fact that you did that for 10 years, I can't even imagine. I've been pushing for just a couple years and I'm exhausted because you just keep hitting walls because you're now dealing with it on a different level. I feel like at this point in our careers, we understand how to deal with this in the immigration legal practice. But to step out of that into potentially political avenues and pushing for advocacy levels, that I actually find even more exhausting because I feel like I hit walls so much more quickly and I don't necessarily know what the next step is. I don't know. Okay, so this is not my end goal. Who do I take it to next? How do we deal with this next step? So
One thing
impressive.
I have on my to-do list, so I've got like my to-do list that's organized by my immediate priority, like within the next 30-day priority, decisions that are pending that might come back. And I've got like my last page is filled with systemic issues that have been parked, where we've got arguments drafted and they went away, or we've got things we want to challenge. And so that's something I come back to every once in a while. But I find like starting, and because I was in sole practice for a couple of years and then I joined with Peter, and I found it very kind of inspiring to see the arc of some of the longer cases that he had going for a while, where you see, you know, after the third refused JR of a negative H&C application, that you finally get it approved. And so I think, you know, it can be exhausting, but working with other people, or same thing, like where I've taken cases from other lawyers who are in practice for a lot longer than me, and they've been ongoing for a long time, and you do eventually see a success. I think that can be very empowering and motivating. But knowing you have to park it sometimes for a while and come back to it.
I think what you just said about success.
I did team up recently on a systemic issue, and it's neat to try it. It didn't land where we wanted it to land, but still, it's nice to join forces and tackle issues as well, I think, as well.
Yeah, well, Kamaljit, we're going to try that again. We did a JR leave application of, what was it, using humanitarian and compassionate discretion.
Or family class dependence, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forget exactly what the issue was now that we argued.
More energy. I mean, it's exhausting sometimes. You see these systemic issues and you're like, God, this needs to be addressed. We need to tackle this. But sometimes one person show is hard. So it's good to team up and either brainstorm or bring on and strategize and bring on 1 or 2 lawyers and do it.
I have to say that I don't think I actually have a brain for strategic litigation. I mean, I was doing strategic stuff when I was with the caregiver work, but that's because that was all that I was doing, and I was not for profit, and I was doing it for close to a decade. And so in that way, the patterns were able to arise, like there was less, like I wasn't looking to run a business. I wasn't looking, you know, like I was doing it all on and so in that way, I was able to kind of mobilize the forces. I had the ability to focus. I had such a broad base of information in terms of like, I could speak to thousands of applications in the same sector, you know, like, but when I'm just practicing on my own, I from time to time will contact Erica and be like, hey, what is this about A16? What's going on here? And we'll start musing about like, have you seen this? Or why are they refusing overseas claims by Syrian refugees? And we'll start strategizing about this. Like, is this something that needs to be come at with a different, and we'll be talking about sort of stuff that has more broad, like far-reaching consequences. But as a sole practitioner, it's very hard because I'm not a sole practitioner, but nobody else in my firm does litigation in the same way that I do, and so it sort of feels like in some ways it's a sole practice. And so, but to sort of think about how do you deal with this from a more far-reaching perspective if you're not collaborating with other colleagues or talking about how these things work. I think that Erica and Erin, your firm is really set up for that, but I think that is pretty standard, at least on the West Coast. I'm not, aware, maybe on the East Coast, there are other firms that are set up like that or elsewhere in the country. But the idea for me of like, okay, how do we address some of these broader issues is really kind of a new concept to me. And I'm really on a steep learning curve about it, which is why, I keep mentioning it on the podcast, and I'm trying to figure out how to do that. But yeah, I don't know. How do you guys come at these sorts of things? I've heard from you, Erica and Erin, about this a fair bit, but I'm just interested, if others have things that are like, do you keep it on a to-do list? Are you like, this is stuff that I want to get at some way? I'm looking for a test case. I actually don't understand how it works.
Yeah, taking on additional work like advocacy, strategic litigation, a lot of this, whether it's sitting on CBA or Carl or doing pro bono litigation, that is something that for my mental health, when my kids are little, I have just put on a back burner. And I've had to be a little bit more protective of my time outside of my work. So I was really active in Carl for a bit. And then I told some people, if I do not quit, I give you permission to quit for me. I'm signing over volunteer power of attorney to you. Please don't allow me in the Zoom meetings, for my own well-being. So, for sure, I have a list of things that I would like to see one day change. And I feel like same with going in and out on different areas of the law. I feel like different times in my life, I have different capacity for, sitting in a lot of strategic planning meetings or, thinking I could do this pro bono because it's an issue I care about. But I'm trying to be more intentional with my volunteer hours and to be a little bit more protective of my
that makes a lot of sense, Laura.
Work time.
Yeah.
One of the things is that we go into this idea immediately of pro bono. Mm-hmm. And yes, there are probably things that must go down that route. But I think for our own mental health, our own well-being, we can also think about where we can get funding from. Legal aid here in British Columbia, they're willing to go pretty far out there if they're the right case with the right legal issues that really will move things forward. And I think that can help. It certainly doesn't, it turns it a little bit more back into the job aspect of your life rather than the volunteer aspect of your life, because we only have so much time to volunteer.
Yeah.
And that's something that I would really advocate for, because we really need more separation. We have so many things to do, so few hours in a week. So if we can move it a little bit more onto our 9 to 5 day, we have more space for it. But not everybody has BC legal aid.
Sorry, I'm too used to interrupting Erin when we talk back and forth all the time. I don't mean to interrupt.
Partnership, yeah.
For me, it tends to be this kind of confluence of things that I'm trying to break apart as you're asking that question, which is it's the right client that comes to me. It's a community that I see it as being a bigger issue. When I happen to be venting about it, all of a sudden someone else will say, oh, they have this issue too. And you'll realize that it's more than just this client before you. And then sometimes it's, you know, the anger that you talk about, that this is really the issue that tips me over at that time. And then I also have capacity for it. So I am usually only doing 1 or 2 kind of strategic litigation things at a time. The rest, I'll have spousal sponsorships, I'll have
wow.
H&Cs, I'll have some easy things that I can be moving forward. And then with the strategic litigation, it's kind of like over an arc where I'll build the framework for the argument that I think needs to win, and I'll have an understanding of why I think this is right. And then it's kind of an almost like it's like a creative endeavor to then try to finesse it in a way where you think you could win with it. And so for me, that kind of takes me out of some of the client work where it becomes more of a creative approach, and
I get it.
I carve out time for myself for that. So it's this whole perfect little mixture of things where, and I've worked with a lot of different, I think everyone here at some point over one of these issues where I think I happen to be venting to one of you, and then it turns out that, oh, you're facing the same issue. Okay, that means this
Let's
is a bigger
exchange
thing.
memos.
Let's go for it.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that gives me so much energy when there's other people involved in it, and seeing the same issues.
This is just a total outside of the kind of flow of our conversation thing, but I'm curious, Laura, because you've worked both East Coast and West Coast, but like here, you know, it's like, oh, that's something interesting. Should we, hey, I have this memo that I wrote and this blah, 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 and we'll share it. And, you know, we're all just talking about stuff. Does the same sort of thing happen on the East Coast when you're working on something like this?
Oh, like 110%.
Cool.
People are so friendly in Toronto. It
that's
is
nice.
shocking to me.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
People like, you know, from the school to the other colleagues, like everyone has been absolutely exceptionally warm and collaborative
That's
out
awesome.
here. So I think it is really it is nationwide that people
That's
are
cool.
willing to share. I do think for a lot of litigation and board work, though, Toronto lawyers have it worse. Like, honestly, the board, the CBSA, it seems like things are harder in Toronto. So I think the road to burnout might be shorter in Toronto.
I think we hear a lot of negative things about the section in Ontario. I think that comes a lot from the corporate side. I think the litigation side is probably pretty similar across the country, but I've heard a lot about that actually practicing before the board on the East Coast is pretty harsh.
I mean, I started my practice in Toronto. I was so happy when I got to Vancouver, and I was like, the CBSA officer engaged with me. They talked to me. That was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And now you have that anxiety when every once in a while one of your files is transferred to the tribunal in Toronto. You're like, ugh, back to Toronto.
Wow.
And it's not necessarily that the outcome is different. It's that the procedure for getting to that outcome is different.
The experience.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. And so it's like, okay, so back to my clients, we're going to prep a little bit more.
No.
Yeah.
I know you're the one asking questions, Deanna, but I was really curious with this.
No, please.
I wanted to hear what people think of self-care. I feel like that's like, you know, the Law Society and everyone is like, oh, all these self-care seminars. And I'd love, other than, you know, talking in community, I'd love to hear how people take care of themselves or their thoughts on. I feel like I can't go to a single one more self-care seminar where I'm told to meditate and
I was going to ask a similar question of like, I was using the word boundaries and I'm like, what does that mean to people? Like what, there's so many buzzwords, and then it's like, well, how do you actually put this into practice?
For me, I have like 2 that are like, my 2 kind of go-to, which is that my daughter really frankly is like a total bullshit detector. Like if I tell her that I'm disconnected and I'm not, she's just like, no, you're not, you know, like she can tell if I'm still in work brain, you know? And so she calls it that I'm offline, you know, and offline means online with work brain. And so it's like, and you know, like there's something about that when I disconnect, like, 'cause she actually, like, she's a very like politically minded kid. She believes in the same political ideals that I do, but at the same time, she's 13. She doesn't want to talk politics, And so when she looks at me and she's like, "Oh, you're worried about stuff. Stop. We're playing now," And so for me, that's one. The other one is my dogs. And like, honestly, like my dogs just want to give love. And I have 2 dogs and I have 2 bunny rabbits. And when I go home and they're there and they want to be with me, they just want mom to be there and just like give love. And if I am tense and stressed, my dogs are insane. And when I chill, they are just calm, And so like they are like, they're like the litmus test of whether I'm bringing my work crap home. And so I don't know how they do it, but they're empaths. All of my animals and my child are empaths. And so somehow they're like, it's like you could apply something to my skin and it tells me whether or not I have put it down for the day. And I get like, it's like a thermometer. It tells me.
I think one important thing that some of these seminars often miss is that like self-care isn't a destination, or like boundaries. You're not just going to get this stuff in order and then all of a sudden it's all going to be better. Like it's such an organic shifting process, and every day what you need might be different. And it's like something that you need to constantly be bringing yourself back to in terms of like setting boundaries, for example. That can be something that becomes very rigid, and if you're too hard with your boundaries, they can in and of themselves become a problem. So you need this like flexibility along with boundaries in the right way, and you need to constantly be bringing yourself back to the things that you enjoy and prioritizing those as well.
For sure. Yeah, definitely.
For me, it's like, it's my dog. It's making sure that I've committed to do a hike with friends or to go running, or I've set a time where I'm going bouldering or something where it's impossible for me to work, so that I have to prioritize time for myself.
Being out in the woods is like a major one too, like going out and like forest bathing, like being surrounded by nature. In the summer, I was swimming like at least twice a week in the ocean, that was a huge one.
You don't have to stop. I went swimming in Lake Ontario this morning.
No, nice. You did not.
0 degrees out.
You did not.
3 degrees in the lake.
Oh my God, Laura, you're like hardcore.
I started doing it, and I'm like very obsessed with it, because I promise you, you cannot think about work when you're in a 3
I am sure that is true.
You can only think about breathing. There is
oh my God.
So,
I'm so sure that's true.
My new hobby.
Oh my God. I go floating sometimes. I don't know if anybody has ever done that, but I think floating is an amazing thing. You go like into a dark
the tanks.
Tank, and it's like total sensory deprivation, and you float there for 70 minutes. I find that amazing.
One of the things that ties back to the original topic is I think I forgot a lot of things that brought me joy. You get so busy.
Yes, I definitely feel that.
And I mean, I'm coming to you right now from Tofino, so I'm doing a little bit of the forest bathing. I'm doing a little bit of all these things, but you just have to stop. It's like, however busy you are, it doesn't matter. You have to take a day, a weekend, a longer weekend, and make these little times for yourself. And I mean, the rule coming into this was, we're not even going to talk about work.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. With the concession that she was going to work this morning and I was going to do a podcast. But yeah, spending time now actually trying to rebuild what you truly enjoy. Like, just take a bit of a litmus test of yourself. Are you in a good place? What's causing it? And for me, the commute, coming back to that, I walk. So I go outside, and I realized how much that does for me.
Yeah.
Just that process. But yeah.
What about you, Kamaljit? You've been very quiet.
I'm listening to you all, and I'm trying to.
She likes the salon, I can tell you. She's always like
No,
getting, no, you
my
don't?
hair is like this. It just,
No, but you get your nails done, no?
no, I
No.
do not. I don't like nail polish on my nails. I don't.
Oh,
Yeah, no, I'm not a nail salon person.
why did I think that?
I do go make workout a part of my routine. When I
Mhm.
had my fourth kid, I got quite sick during the delivery, and it was pretty bad. So then I made a decision that, geez, I got to be around. I got 4 kids, so I've really got to look after myself. So exercise is a big part of that, and girlfriend time. Honestly, just we call it Friday. We get together and we just. I don't drink. She has. There's 2 of them. They have wine. I'll have tea, and we just talk. And in fact, even in the mornings at my office, I've had the same legal assistant for 27 years. We will
Wow.
sit, have a cup of tea, and we'll probably go about complaints about our husbands or whatever, just chit-chatting. I've got my son getting married next year. So I've got sort of these, I call them lifelines as well. And some of them are colleagues, some of them are, just friends I've grown up with, and another is a legal assistant. And just being able to have that, because as much as children bring joy,
Mm,
4 of them can really wear you down. So it's
mm,
nice to disconnect from them as well, to really
for
know
sure.
do things for me. And I've gotten a little bit of guilt from the older one from that. Oh, you were away again and you missed my birthday. I'm like, buddy, you're 26 now. When you hit a milestone,
Oh my
we'll all be
gosh.
there. But right, really
Yeah.
saying that I don't want to have that guilt anymore, and it's okay for me to look after myself and my clients. I'll do the
Yeah.
best I can, and finding space for myself amongst everyone else.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
There's
It's not easy. And
for
sometimes just going
sure.
into my room, closing my door, being away from everyone is the best thing.
Totally. Well, that's the thing. I don't ever take time for myself. That's why I started floating, because it's like just solitude is so important for me, and I just like I don't ever think to take it. I'm always like, oh, I've got all these, people in my house I can hang, or people or animals, like, but to actually, and I also I think that it's a moving target, as you said, Erica, that one moment it might be that I need to be swimming. Sometimes I need to just go for a walk. Like there are a couple of other things that arose as you all were talking. One of them is that like sometimes I'll just get to work and I'm just like, I feel stupid today. And then it's like, okay, so then don't work, just
Yeah.
leave. That's
Yeah.
the reason we went into business. Or,
Yes.
that like, I sometimes find that I'm like pushing against a closed door and, being very, very unforgiving. It's like, what's wrong with me today? Why can't I think? And it's like, you just can't. So stop. And just not listening to the signals that you're sending yourself. Like sometimes an entire week will be like that. And it's like, but I don't feel like I can enjoy myself. So I feel like I'm wasting the time. Well, sometimes you just need to sleep. Sometimes you need to it doesn't always look like fun. Sometimes it's just like whatever, like, oh, but I should be exercising. I should be eating better. I should be it's not always something like all great and exciting. Like it's gonna change, and it's just about, as we said earlier, just listening in and figuring out what it is that you need. It doesn't always have to be something super glamorous.
Yeah, and I work less. I work less than I did when I was a young associate. Like I think I did so many hours out of fear, like when I was young, that I didn't know when to stop on an agency or refugee claim or on, or even if I'd be done the consult, I'd still be thinking about it. And yeah, I am more aggressive about just working less.
I'm sure you've all
So
had that experience where you sat and you've listened to your client and you've heard the whole story, and then you walk away and you don't work for a day or maybe even 2, and then you come back and you're like, oh, I've just figured out what this claim is about, or I've just understood what is the part of this agency that's actually going to work, and sometimes when you're like, you can't see the forest for the trees when you're just like in it so much.
I think that's
yeah,
working.
and I mean, I think Erica said at the beginning, like, I would like to keep doing this. So I'd like to keep doing this for, you know, as long as I'm physically and mentally able. So if that means some months or years I like work differently or less or more in some areas and less in others, it's just going to be like that. Sorry, Kamaljit, I interrupted you.
No, I think that's smart when we say, you know, I need to just sit on this, and we don't need to. It's that guilt. For some reason, we just figure as lawyers, okay, we need to be sitting at the office, work to justify being here. But I think it's important to just, if your brain is numb and it's not able to do what it needs to do, you need to segue, do something else, come back at it later, right? I think that's healthy. But yeah, no, I've been, like I said, 33 years and I'm still doing it and I'm still enjoying it. And I think it is because I have reduced the amount of time I spend. I also did weave in mediation into my practice, like not meditation, mediation. So I go and see other lawyers and help them resolve their problems. And it's nice to see conclusion and end and not heaviness and stuff I have to take back. And I found that's been I really enjoy that. I don't do a ton of it, but it gets me out of the office. It's a whole different way of using my brain and interacting with people. So that's something I knew I bought into my practice probably 9 years ago.
Wow.
The amount of time, and maybe I think it's just part of the learning curve, and we see this when there's new lawyers that we're working with, but like the amount of time and energy I've wasted when I should have taken a break is, I think, one of the most important parts of the learning curve. You sit there and you think you need to make it perfect and you need to keep going at it, but really taking a break. And then when you come back to it, it is, you got an aha moment, something distilled for yourself. And yeah, breaks are so important.
I know. I just know that, like, especially when I'm doing federal court work, when I'm just like writing and rewriting and rearranging a federal, like a memo for federal court, it's just like, okay, just walk away. Just walk away. I want to be really mindful of everybody's time.
I like Kamaljit too, that's like 24 years into practice. You're like, I'm going to add something so different, right? It uses a completely different skill set. So yeah, I love that.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been good.
Yeah.
It's so amazing to see all of you powerful women on the screen. Like,
yeah, this has been fun.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, incredible to see and be amongst you all.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you all for joining. It's been really great. Oh, sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
I was just going to say as a final comment, it's this meeting and even just coming together, yes, we're talking about some of the stresses we have, but it also underlies all of the successes. And that's what keeps us here. And that's what invigorates us. And I mean, in our office, we have a habit of sharing them. So if some amazing long fought agency gets one, that team of people will post it being like, we got it. Just to keep everybody going and bring it all together back to the team that got us there.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, that is another thing. That's a really good ending comment, because like, that's another thing about working in this area is that your successes are private. Nobody gets to hear about them. Your refugee decisions are not public record. Like, it's just, and again, that's not that we're looking for accolades or anything like that, but you know, I don't know, it's between you and your client, and that's great. But I think that a lot of other businesses, you kind of, part of what motivates people is that they reach this kind of success. They got all sorts of feedback, whereas our kind of success is between us and our clients, and that's wonderful. But it's kind of, I mean, maybe it's the same. I don't know. It just feels somehow a little bit different that even amongst our colleagues, we know one another because we know that we're in the area, but you know, there's something a little bit lonely about it. Like, I've never actually seen another person's refugee claim. And so when I'm working on mine, I'm like, I hope that this is what I'm supposed to be doing, you know, like, you know, we're all kind of having to create it in a vacuum. And in that's, you know, you have to develop your own sense of like fortitude, knowing that you're doing it right, that you're doing the best thing for your client without having had that same the sense of like reinforcement that you would otherwise get. I never got trained in how to write it. Like, yes, I've attended seminars, but again, it's much more, you have to be kind of self-made. And so it is nice to be able to kind of get together as a group like this and just be like, good job, everybody, you know, like we're doing it. We're doing great. Yay.
Yeah, and I echo that. Like, I feel like how wonderful that in a system that can be so cruel and difficult, there's like incredibly bright, fierce women just, I don't know, I'm probably not allowed to swear on their podcast, sorry.
I already did, so you're good.
Doing it, like actually
Yeah.
like, and making it, you know, and making like policy change and legal change and representing like doing the daily slog of representing clients like in the day-to-day applications. So yeah.
And not getting burnt out and not,
not,
I mean, not being discouraged from continuing to do the work and not turning into angry trolls and just like continuing to do the compassionate work. Good on us.
And I think seeing that, yeah, keeps me going. Like there have been times where I felt burnt out, and seeing and thinking about other people who are still doing it and feeling like you're in community with it has been such a big part of keeping going.
So maybe that
I
is
was like,
part
pour
of
one out for Barb Jackman being the like true light of
yeah.
the true light of how we could keep going for decades and decades.
I do think that has to be part of our like our, what did you call it, Erica? Like our wellness thing, you know, like that actually seeing other, like there has to be like some kind of shared experience of being like, okay, you know, like encouraging one another. And it's like, you know, there is something about this kind of area of practice where like, you know, I don't know. I think it's nice to just be able to kind of like huddle together sometimes and be like, yay, just for a little dopamine hit.
Yeah.
Everybody gets a pat on the back.
Yeah. All right, my dears. Thank you.
I don't know how to do the little Zoom emojis.
Yes. I don't know either. Oh, there you did. Good job.
Yay.
Now this will
Thanks so
turn
much.
into a weekly coffee drink.
Yeah, that's right.
Nice to see you all.
Nice to see you all too.
Absolutely.
Nice to do. Bye,
Happy
everyone.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Bye.
Deanna. Bye.
Bye.